Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I'm going to talk you through all the books that I read in April. Now, April was a pretty good reading month for me. It had my spring break. If you're new here, I'm a teacher. So I was able to read a great deal over spring break and I really enjoyed a lot of the books that I read. So let me talk you through them. So the first book that I read was Rainbow Valley by L.M. Montgomery, and I read this over the weekend, the day that I got my second dose of the COVID vaccine, which went very well, but I was just not feeling quite myself for that whole weekend. So I wanted something light and something cozy and warm to help me feel a little bit better. And L.M. Montgomery always does that. Rainbow Valley is the 7th book in the Anne of Green Gables series, so I can't tell you too much about it in case you haven't read the rest of the series or don't want to know what happens. But it does follow mainly Anne's children as they play and grow up and learn various life lessons, as well as neighboring children and friends that they make from other nearby families or in school, and how they all interact with each other. It was, like I said, fun and lovely, although there is some foreshadowing of what will happen in the final book that gets me really emotional and really upset and makes me slightly frightened to read that final book, but I know that it'll be worth it in the end. So overall, if you loved the Anne series, they are definitely worth continuing. The next book that I read was Agnes Gray by Anne Bronte, which was exciting for two reasons. First of all, it is part of Marissa at Blatantly Bookish's Bronte project for the year. This was our read for April. And in addition, it was the first book by Anne Bronte that I had ever read. And everyone always raved to me about Anne Bronte's writing, and they were absolutely right. I did really enjoy this book as well. It follows Agnes Gray, whose family ends up falling on hard times, and so she decides to become a governess in order to earn some money to send home to her family. Really, this book is about Agnes's both struggles as a governess and also her personal struggles with her family, with I don't want to say crush that she develops because that trivializes it, but we don't necessarily know that it's returned, so it kind of is. Anyway, with a local man in one of the neighborhoods in which she is working. What struck me most about this novel was not only how blunt and snarky Anne could be, which I really enjoyed. If anybody knows me very well, I can tend to be a bit blunt and snarky if I feel comfortable enough with you, but also the fact that the problems that Agnes faces with a lot of her young charges, such as parents either undermining the work that she is trying to do or expecting her to create 180-degree changes in their children entirely by herself with very little support from them, are things that teachers are still facing. Maybe it's because we've hit rather a rocky point in the school year myself, but I still find myself dealing with similar issues on a day-to-day basis. And in a way that's a bit frightening, that we still have not learned as a human race how to best help to educate our children. But similarly, it was kind of a comfort to me that I'm not the first one to go through this. It's not something that I personally am doing, and that gave me a sort of hope. Hello there, Heather from a future video, reminding you that I also read Henry VIII by William Shakespeare in the month of April, and I have a whole separate video about that, which you can find on my channel. Then I just pulled some books off my shelves for good old fun, and the first book that I pulled was The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichak, which is a new release that my friend Jonathan very kindly bought for me back in February because he knows how much I love Loki. This book, if you haven't heard of it, tells the story of Angrboda, who in Norse mythology was the mother of 3 of Loki's children. Hel, who becomes goddess of the underworld, Fenrir, the giant wolf, and Jotun the giant serpent, all three of whom play a major role in Ragnarok. So we know all of this going in because we know Norse mythology, but we get to hear it all from Angrboda's perspective, and her perspective on the Aesir and the Vanir and all the goings-on in Asgard, while at the same time trying to live a relatively normal life, and her ever-changing relationship with Loki himself. I loved this book. If you love similar retellings like Circe or The Song of Achilles, this is definitely in that vein. And yeah, I can't rave enough about it. It pulled me in so deeply. I felt like it skimmed over certain moments or certain joining moments, but the depth that she gave to other experiences definitely made up for that. And there was sort of a Nordic starkness that those skimming moments gave the story, which felt kind of appropriate. The next book that I picked up was The Dig by John Preston, which, as you can see by the cover, is the basis for the Netflix film that came out at the beginning of the year, starring Ralph Fiennes, Lily James, and Carey Mulligan, all of whom I adore. So I really wanted to read the book first before I watched that film. It tells the story of true events of the digs at Sutton Hoo. And Sutton Hoo was a big manor house out in the English countryside. Mrs. Pretty, a widow who lives there with her young son, had always been curious about these mounds that were out in the fields near her house. And so she calls in Mr. Brown, who is an archaeologist, to come in and dig up these mounds and see if there is anything underneath them. And they discover that these mounds were in fact Dark Age burial sites. And so this book tells from several perspectives what that dig was like, both the initial discovery, all of the bureaucracy between various museums and the government that eventually become involved, as well as the urgency behind it, given that this dig takes place in 1939 as World War II is looming ever closer. All of that sounds wonderful, and the trailer for the film looked beautiful and incredible and moving. I was a bit disappointed with the way this story was told, however. For almost every narrator, in fact, for every narrator, the story is either told very matter-of-factly, in extremely cut and dry terms, or they're alluding to some mystery going on in their personal lives, and yet you're never entirely sure, and it is never revealed, what that mystery actually is. And it doesn't seem to have any sort of a bearing on the ultimate conclusion of the story. So I found that very unsatisfying. So I'm hoping that the film is told in a much more engaging way. I will let you know once I see it. Let me know down below if you've already watched it. Next, I picked up my nonfiction book for the month, and I waited till the end of the month because it is Hamlet Globe to Globe by Dominic Dromgoole. And since Shakespeare's birthday was yesterday, the 23rd, I thought this book would be appropriate to read towards the end of April. And it tells the story of back in 2014, when Dominic Dromgoole and the other executives of the Globe Theatre in London decided to take a touring company of Hamlet to every country in the world that they could. If a war broke out or an epidemic broke out, they avoided that country, but they planned to take it to every country in the world. I am not very far in so far, but it is already fascinating. It is part travel documentary, talking about the various countries they visit and the reception the play has, especially with specific people from that country who are sent to see it. They make a point of playing these plays to the masses, not just to foreign dignitaries. But there's always a particular dignitary or a particular scholar who has spoken to Dominic Dromgoole after seeing the production that he always manages to highlight in the novel. And that's not done to wipe out what the general populace thought. He always highlights that as well. But talking about a particular person who saw it and who could talk to him helps to put a face on how the play was received wherever they were. So it's partly travel documentary, but the other half is Dominic Dromgoole musing on various aspects of Hamlet and why it is so popular, why it works the way it does, and why we still find it so engaging and so enduring, and what we can do to continue to engage with it and find new meaning from it every time we watch it. I would highly recommend it. It is funny, it is beautiful, it is incredibly intelligent. I am loving it so far, and I don't see any reason why that would change as I continue to read it. So those were the books that I read so far in April. I am still hoping to pick up Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, provided I finish Hamlet Globe to Globe. So if I do get to this, I will include it in my May wrap-up. Let me know down below if you are intrigued by any of these books, what you thought about any of them, if you've read them as well. And indeed, let me know if you read a particularly exciting book this month, because I'm always looking for new recommendations. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.